Great. Welcome everyone to the Collaboration for Healthier Lives Employee Expert Wellbeing Series. Thank you so much for joining today's session. So I'm Sharon and I lead Healthier Lives here at the Consumer Goods Forum. And I'll just give you a 2-minute overview of our work before we get into the subject today with our experts from Johnson & Johnson. So at the Consumer Goods Forum, we have been working on health and wellness for quite some time, and we created a coalition of action last year with the mission to really empower people to lead healthier lives and create shared value for businesses and the communities where we operate all around the globe. We do that through three mechanisms, really looking at inspiring behaviors, using digital and new business innovations, and of course, enabling healthy workforces by implementing employee health and wellbeing programs. We definitely, with everything that's happened around the world, we feel that last year was, and this year will be the year of the people. So we have put this big focus on putting employees at the core of our agenda. So to give you an idea of the companies that have signed up to our coalition of action, here you can see the CEOs who've gotten behind our mission and vision of this Healthier Lives coalition of action into this framework. So how we do it, as I mentioned, we focus on employees. We work in stores, as the Consumer Goods Forum is a retailer and manufacturer business-led organization, on stores in countries, 70 countries around the world, and digital, how we can really reach people through a digital ecosystem. So employees is really central to everything we're trying to do, walking the talk with our own people and everything that we're trying to inspire in healthier behaviors. The employee working group driving this agenda have 3 priority areas. They focus on health and safety first. How can we keep all of our workers around the globe safe during this global pandemic? We focus on workforce nutrition. We have a global alliance with the GAIN, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. So how can we really optimize the nutrition through the workplace? And the third area is on well-being. And we have an ambition to develop KPIs in this space and really build references for employers in our industry, but beyond. So this is a space where we are today. One of the asks of the working group was to create a space for dialogue with professionals around the globe. So this session is being recorded. Those of you who are with us live here today, warm welcome. And those of you who will be listening to this in the future, we hope you enjoy it. And please feel free to ask any questions that you have. So it is a series. We had our first session at the end of January with Danone and Bimbo, and the recording of that session is available on our website. I'm thrilled to be with Jennifer and Sean today from Johnson & Johnson, focusing on enabling a culture of well-being with a deep dive into employee mental health. Our next session in March will be with Ahold Delhaize, and our April session will be with Barilla. So if you're interested in finding out more or speaking, please do let me know. Questions on Zoom, presuming you all know this, but we do have, if you could use the Q&A box, that would be absolutely wonderful in the control panel. You can also send an email to hw@theconsumergoodsforum.com. If we don't manage to get to your question today, I promise that we will follow up with you after today's session. So we hope it'll be interactive. We will leave ample time at the end of the session to get those questions from you. And ask anything that you want, and we hope to have an open and transparent dialogue with all of you. And so with that, I'm thrilled to introduce this month's experts. So Jennifer Posa, the Global Head of Employee Mental Wellbeing and Workplace Effectiveness and Global Health Services with Johnson & Johnson, and Sean Chai, who's the Global Head of Employee Health Innovation and Global Health Services at Johnson & Johnson. And Sean sits on our Employee Health and Wellbeing Working Group, helping us drive that strategy of putting employees at the core of our agenda. So with that, I'll hand it over to Sean, I believe, to get us started. So thank you in advance, and we look forward to connecting with all of you after the presentations with your questions. So Sean, over to you.
Sharon, thank you for the warm introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for the opportunity for Johnson & Johnson to share our learning today. I want to just take a moment to recognize the value of the Consumer Goods Forum in our thought partnership with all of you, this amazing community. This team has done an amazing job in meeting the acute needs of our consumers, employees, while managing our own work-life balance during this very challenging time. I know I always look forward to our call and talking to all of you as we continue to reimagine the future of health together. I think another key reason that J&J is part of this forum is that we firmly believe we have a very unique voice in the health for humanity and sustainability conversation. We believe that sustainability and total health must become part of the consumer health value proposition. And as you can see in the next slide, this commitment is guided by our Healthy Lives mission, with a goal of increasing value and innovation through an integrated and sustainable business strategy. Some of our commitments in the Healthy Lives mission this year include providing transparency on all the ingredients we use in our products, and also addressing preventable health issues caused by smoking and preventable skin cancers. You also see that the third pillar, the empower employee pillar, is one of our strategic focus. And one of the priorities in this area is the health and well-being of our employees. I like to tell people that we are on this very special mission to become the healthiest workforce, and we want to help all of our employees achieve all aspects of their well-being. Of course, that includes physical, emotional, financial, and mental well-being. And I also believe that this now has to be enabled by a very unique hybrid approach, providing both on-site and virtual resources and tools to meet the evolving needs of our workforce. Today, my colleague Jen Posa, who again is the head of our Global Mental Wellbeing Program, will highlight some of our key priorities and focus areas in the employee mental wellbeing space. Jen, welcome to CGF, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Sean. And thanks, Sharon. Again, I think I echo Sean's comments, and we really appreciate the CPG's leadership and an opportunity to have this discussion. And on behalf of all of the Johnson & Johnson employees and our leaders, I'm thrilled to be here to share a little bit more about what we're doing at Johnson & Johnson in the area of mental and emotional health and well-being. And then have some rich discussion, like you mentioned, Sharon, towards the end of the call, because I really think that that's where we all begin to learn from one another. So thank you again for the opportunity. So, like Sean mentioned, we have a very strong commitment to sustainability. And the vision behind that is really for Johnson & Johnson to blend our hearts, science, and ingenuity to profoundly change the trajectory of health for humanity. And what that really enables Sean, myself, everyone at Johnson & Johnson to do each day is to impact people's lives. And I think that's just so incredibly important. It's part of who we are, each of us individually, as well as an organization. Next slide. So as we look to achieve that goal, something that we call our Credo culture significantly supports us in doing that. So the Johnson & Johnson Credo is something that has led us in all of the work that we do, in every aspect of that work each and every day. And it's very common for Sean, myself, and others at Johnson & Johnson to really say, well, is that Credo driven? Is that something that, we're focused on as an organization? And does it support our Credo and our commitment to all of those stakeholders that we serve? So from an employee perspective, part of our Credo, actually our second paragraph of our Credo, really speaks to the commitment that we make to our employees and their families. And we feel as though each and every day it is our responsibility to support the health and well-being of the Johnson & Johnson employees as well as their family members, and then extending out to that community. So how do we do this? We do that through actively investing in the health and well-being to achieve our personal best each day. Oftentimes you will hear when you're on phone calls, internal calls, about all of us talking about, how can we bring our best selves to work each and every day? And that doesn't only include us bringing our best selves to the workplace, but also to our lives. And we truly support that at Johnson & Johnson. The second area is really working in an environment that fosters and supports healthy choices. Making health the easy choice has been a focus of ours for many years and will continue to be. And interestingly enough, as Sean mentioned, our hybrid environment and how many of us have been forced to change the location in which we work, this has been actually an exciting area for us to explore and innovate in. And then third, achieving the balance in body, mind, and spirit to ignite that full engagement and purpose at work, at home, and within our communities. So really, Sharon, when I think about, our commitment to health and well-being at Johnson & Johnson, it's truly Credo driven, which actually enables Sean, myself, and others at Global Health Services to really drive that home with all of the programs and support that we offer. Next slide. So as part of the Global Health Services organization at Johnson & Johnson, we really do focus on enabling that physical, mental, emotional, and financial health of our employees and their families. And as you can kind of see here on the slide, what we have is an incredibly robust team that works on that. And I'm very fortunate to call all of these folks my colleagues. But we have over 200 dedicated professionals focused on our goals at Global Health Services. We are in close to 500 locations around the globe, as well as serving and operating in about 75 countries. So as we think about the breadth and depth of not only our global population, but also our operations within those global communities, it's critically important that we're really establishing a very strong and strategic approach to the work that we do in the area of mental health and well-being. Our first priority is really to protect and invest in our employees, communities, and businesses. The second is to empower and inspire our employees to proactively champion and advance their health and well-being. And then third would be building those workplace cultures of health, which Johnson & Johnson has a very rich history in doing, and I'm incredibly grateful for because of the pandemic that we've all been experiencing and managing throughout each one of our companies that we work within and we lead within. So let me share a little bit more around maybe the platforms and the specific platform for mental well-being and what we do here at Johnson & Johnson to enable us to be able to support our employees and their families with those critical resources and programs that are needed, regardless of whether or not you're experiencing a mental health issue, maybe have been diagnosed with a mental health condition, or you're looking to build your resilience and improve that mental and emotional well-being. Next slide. So when we think about the services at Johnson & Johnson and what we've built over the years is we're really looking to serve our entire population from a continuum. So, if I were going to have a side conversation, Sharon, with you, and we were going to talk about your life and your journey and your career and how you've managed your mental and emotional health throughout your life, you would likely actually have a conversation about, well, I experienced this loss, which was very significant for me. Or I was diagnosed with this, or a family member was diagnosed with this condition, which might have been a mental health condition that could be chronic or it could be acute, right? And maybe the other thing you might say is, I had a really significant change in my life. And, it impacted me in a way that I wasn't expecting, but it absolutely impacted my mental and emotional health. So when we think about you as an individual, and we think about all of those individuals around the globe that we care for, we think about that journey and that employee experience and how life is really a journey and kind of a windy road, right? And we think about that from the continuum of there will be instances that there's a high likelihood that our employees might be impacted by a mental health condition themselves or those family members that they care so much for. And then also on the other side is, you might be at a point in your life or perhaps an individual that's incredibly focused on your mental well-being and, building resilience each and every day. So at Johnson & Johnson, we have programs that focus on disease management, treating those very serious diagnoses and areas of behavioral health that many of us either have experienced or know someone that has experienced. Sometimes that requires disability services or accommodations. Other times it's recognizing those symptoms, ensuring that they're getting the right care at the right time with the right quality provider. And we certainly work with all of our medical benefits partners to do that and ensure that care is provided. On the other piece, as we kind of move further right on the continuum, we want to make sure that we can focus on prevention and early detection. We've talked a lot about that in the last year in terms of mental and emotional health and making sure people understand and recognize those signs and symptoms that are indicating that, you might actually need to either seek some support or benefit from a little self-care to ensure that you can maintain that very strong emotional and mental well-being. And then if we move further over to the right, I talked a little bit about resilience and growth and thriving, and ensuring that, again, as a high performing individual, we always want to support our employees so that they can be as productive in work as well as in their lives as possible. I'll go back to that statement of bringing your best self to your life each and every day. And our goal is to support all of our high performing colleagues around the globe to ensure that they can do that, and then learn from the science that exists. I mean, when I think about the last few decades and the advancement in neuroscience and our understanding of the brain and how the brain functions, it's incredible. I feel as though it's going to be something that, 10 years from now, if we're sitting in the same discussion and we're looking backwards, we're saying to ourselves, this is absolutely incredible. So what we do at Johnson & Johnson, and I think we are privileged to have partners that really study therapeutic areas that are of great interest to us and incredibly important in the area of mental health. We are constantly peeling back that onion, leveraging one another, the subject matter expertise, in addition to Sean and I, that exist within Johnson & Johnson, and then also working collaboratively with our external partners to advance that science, support the advancements of the science, and then integrate that science into the work that we do. So overall, we really are committed and have been for many years on providing that comprehensive care, services, and resources that would support an individual with their mental and emotional well-being. Next slide. So when I think about COVID, and Sharon, you, Sean, and I talked about this before our talk today, right? You asked a great question. You said, well, gosh, the last year has been challenging for so many employers. And I know on last month's session, some of the other speakers talked about this as well. But when we think about and we look in that rearview mirror and we look at what has happened and things that have changed, and then we say, how did we respond to the challenges of COVID? When folks ask that question of myself and Sean, when we're talking about Johnson & Johnson, I think it's easiest to explain it in that we actually took somewhat of a phased response, but these phases somewhat overlap, as you would imagine. But I think back to when we first learned of coronavirus and how it was going to impact our employees around the globe. And, I will call out and speak to the resilience of our Asia Pacific colleagues. And, they were impacted by coronavirus, before we were here in the United States. And when I think back to that, our immediate focus at Johnson & Johnson was on employee health protection, making sure that we had the right responses in place for the crisis that was, we were beginning to learn more and more about. I mean, I don't know if you remember, Sharon, but you remember it was almost like an hourly update we were receiving, right? Every 24 hours, you were kind of pulling out your phone or pulling up a website to say, what's happening now? What does this all really mean? So when you think about that at this population level in the global environment, and when we're trying to manage, close to 140,000 employees around the globe, each having this impact them in different times, in different ways, we really had to focus on managing our facilities, identifying those high-risk potentials, and making sure that we could protect those employees at our work sites as well as within their communities as best as possible. So what we did was we established a sense of governance, if you will, where we established global and local crisis management teams. I think this was something that I look to, and the colleagues that, manage this effort, I just look with such admiration, because it was probably one of the best things that we ever quickly did, to ensure that we did have some level of governance. People knew where to go and how to manage that, and then how to actually assess the needs within all of those local areas, right? So it wasn't only the global oversight, it was also the localization of that. And then making sure that there were procedures and policies in place to protect the health and safety of our employees. And then, of course, end-to-end processes to protect those employees was essential to ensure and safeguard the health and safety. The third and the fourth phases, I think we're, still currently in today and very much laser focused on, which is leadership support and guidance. How do we ensure that our leaders have what they need, and also ensure that our leaders have the ability to support and guide employees if they do need additional support, whether that be on the physical or the mental side of health, as well as any other area of health when we look at the full picture. In terms of well-being support, this has become absolutely critical. I think every single leader within our organization, as well as every employee, understands individually as well as a business how critically important our well-being is to actually manage in times of uncertainty and change and impact on our daily lives. From a social connectivity perspective, we are very focused on this, and our digital strategy as well as our opportunities to leverage new virtual mediums. I remember I would say if there was a learning curve that, was incredibly steep for myself and perhaps others who, were in the office when COVID hit, is, we all use Zoom incredibly efficiently now, right? Zoom wasn't part of everyone's vocabulary a little over a year ago. And then also we explored different technologies, right? We were very experimentative. But what worked for us in terms of social connectivity, I think the technology was a huge gift, and I would imagine that the other employers on the phone would agree with that. If we didn't have the technology we have today, and it was maybe 30 years ago, we'd be in a very different situation and we would have reacted quite differently. I also think from a social connectivity perspective, it's enabled us to actually connect much more easily and almost continue that work and create new ways of working. What I think is interesting is that conversation around, well, what have we lost without that one-on-one personal interaction, right? And I think we focus a lot on that when we think about the mental and emotional health of Johnson & Johnson employees. And then the last piece under phase 3 in terms of support, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the work that many of my colleagues work on work-life flexibility and resources. So we've always had flexible work arrangements at Johnson & Johnson, but of course the pandemic has taken this to a whole new level. So we actually, again, took a step back, evaluated our programs, and ensured that they were robust and met the needs of what we were seeing within our employee population. And then last, from a sustainability perspective, again, we're here today. We want to build, additional, enhance our strategy and build into this very strong foundation that we have at Johnson & Johnson that I spoke about, but we don't want to do it in ways that support sustainability. And that would include focus on work-life experience, a focus on ensuring that our employees can continue to be engaged in their work the way that they want to be, desire to be, and that enables us to achieve those health for humanity goals. I would confidently say that every individual that wants to and has worked with Johnson & Johnson, has such an incredible commitment to our health for humanity goals. And each day that I come to work, I might be doing, tasks 1, 2, and 3, and then tomorrow it's task 4, 5, and 6. But at the end of the day, I know when I close down that laptop and I finish my day, I'm part of a much larger mission to achieve these goals. And I think that element within our work engagement is so critically important. but even the changes within the workplace, me working from my home office versus working, and being able to walk down the hall and have a conversation with Sean has definitely and can definitely impact my ability to be engaged at work. So we need to think about those and then identify new ways of working that will really ensure that we maintain that high level of work engagement, but also enable us to continue to be fulfilled as individuals within the work that we do. And then I would just also speak to our psychologically healthy environments and communities. We're starting to hear a lot more about this in our communities. We're talking a lot more about this. What does it mean to have a psychologically healthy environment at work? We've often termed this as, culture of health. And we pride ourselves at Johnson & Johnson has been focused on delivering and ensuring a culture of health for many decades at this point. But I will tell you that, how do you measure that? How do you assess it? Where do you go with it? Where are the opportunities for us to build and advance where we are today? Like everything else, and regardless of the business that you're in, nothing is static. Everything is dynamic. And I think what COVID did for us is it put a lot of things, I want to say, on steroids, where everything started to just move faster and faster. And, it was, oh my gosh, we could do this. So, sometimes that does happen in times of crisis. And I'm very proud to say that the Global Health Services team, as well as our entire Total Rewards team, really has stepped up to the plate. And we've seen great successes by taking a look at our environments, our culture, our climates within our work teams, and evaluating them even further. And then finally, I would just speak to perceived organizational and supervisor support. There's decades of research that drives, the importance of individuals really understanding the value their organization places in them and how much their organization cares about them and supports them. And I think this is a very important measurement of success for us here at Johnson & Johnson. We conduct a Credo survey where we do assess that perception. And it's incredibly important to us. And I'm very proud to say that over the last year, when we did survey, and we continue to survey our employees on their feelings, on how Johnson & Johnson as an organization is supporting them, we are thrilled with the results. They're very high. And I feel as though we even have more room to grow in that area. I don't know that we'll ever feel as though we're done with that, because it's part of our commitment to say, how much more can we do? And oftentimes when we're having one-on-one conversations with employees that are either struggling with a mental or emotional health issue, or they are in need of additional support, we're asking them, how would this best be served up to you? What is it that need really is? How can we think about this differently? Sean and I talk a lot about design thinking and making sure design thinking is part of the work that we do. And it's absolutely essential. And our focus on that employee experience and making sure we meet their needs are just top of mind these days. And I think what COVID has done is it's overemphasized, how important that approach is within our environment, and then understanding that that approach might look different depending on the region of the world that you live in. And Sharon, we were talking before the call, right? And you shared with me that you reside in Paris. I reside in New Jersey here in the United States. So your experience right now in your environment is very different than it is for me, because I've got my local government telling me, what I can and cannot do. And schools have just begun opening for me this week in person with my children. We do have restaurants open, but you were sharing with me in Paris right now, many of those pubs are still closed. So, even if we were talking, we would have unique differences as individuals, and you would need different things than what I need, because your situation is truly unique, and then your individual situation is unique. So again, I'll go back to saying, as we think about supporting those close to 140,000 employees around the globe, what matters to Sean and I is that we understand the needs of our individual employees, as well as meet those needs as best that we can and innovate to do so in an even better way. So next slide. So as I continue to share a little bit more about our strategy, I did want to just point to some key best practices and strategies that I think we put in place that we've all really truly benefited from over the last year, and perhaps even a little bit longer than a year at this point as the days continue to move forward. So the first strategy, and you know, it's funny because let me just make one other side point with this, Sharon, is, you know, these 4 areas that I'm going to talk about, I'm speaking to them about what we did with COVID and somewhat as a response to COVID. But I will say that each and every one of them are ones that I think moving forward, we will continue to focus on. So one of our biggest learnings was how critically important each one of these were. And I think we knew that before, but I think what it did was illuminate the value of having leadership support, ensuring you had the right strategic collaboration, making sure that you had effective communication strategies in place. And then finally, ensuring that people understood how to access resources and leverage those when they needed them, and ensured that they got the resources that were most important to them based on their needs. So let me start with the first one on leadership support. And I just, you know, I really feel like it's incredibly important to say that I am truly honored to work at Johnson & Johnson, because all the way from Alex Gorski, our executive committee, and all of the other leaders at Johnson & Johnson that I'm privileged to work with, you know, have had incredible support around the area of mental and emotional health and well-being from day one when the pandemic hit. You know, I probably will forever remember that, you know, within a couple weeks of the pandemic hitting, you know, one of the emails that we received was, you know, can we please heighten the importance of making sure that people safeguard their emotional and mental well-being during this time? And only a few weeks later, we were on a global, you know, forum panel explaining the importance of this to our employees around the globe so that we could make sure we were ready and arming them and empowering them with what they needed. So that top-down leadership support is ever present in all areas of health at Johnson & Johnson, and something that we're incredibly committed to. I think the other piece is I want to just also credit the leaders throughout our sectors and our regions. We talk a lot, you know, with your team around our consumer health division, and I want to recognize all of the leaders within that division, because what we did do throughout 2020 was we didn't just provide resources and links to those resources and share what they were. We actually, you know, partnered with those leaders, and those leaders, you know, made a point of having town halls and open communication and discussion with their employees and talking about the prioritization of mental and emotional health throughout this crisis, and as we continued to manage and learn as we did. Very early, I would imagine that each one of us on this webinar understood that there were so many unknowns and there was so much uncertainty in your lives, in every aspect of your life. And it's incredibly unsettling, and especially to actually show up at work and feel productive and being able to focus on those tasks, I mean, is just something that human beings overall would have difficulty in, regardless of how resilient you are. But with that leadership support, with that taking a pause and re-emphasizing how important and how much our leaders support individuals seeking the support that they may need for themselves or their families, it became even a greater part of our culture. So I think that leadership support is absolutely critical, and I'm grateful to, you know, our leaders for providing that to all of the employees around the globe. The second area was strategic collaboration, and I can't underestimate this. So I will just first point to just a few of the organizations internally that we strategically collaborated with at Global Health Services. The first would be our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Group, our DE&I team. They're an incredibly important team for so many reasons that all of us are aware of, right? Respecting that individual difference, bringing that diversity into your workforce, excelling from a talent management perspective, and making sure that we can innovate with all of these creative minds. And, you know, I would say that the collaboration with DE&I was incredible. And one of the groups, that the D&I team manage are our ERGs, our employee resource groups. We have 12 employee resource groups at Johnson & Johnson. And one of those employee resource groups is called the Alliance for Diverse Abilities, which includes a focus on mental, physical, any type of disability, and also diversity that you might have as an individual. And we have a team within our ADA called the Mental Health Diplomats. And this is a peer support group that enables us to really take a grassroots approach and ensure that the support is available at that peer-to-peer level to make sure that everyone understands that, again, mental and emotional health are top priorities for us. So that team and that partnership with our DE&I colleagues was absolutely essential, because it not only enabled us to raise the importance of inclusivity and diversity within the workplace, but it also enabled us to leverage our grassroots ERG communities like the ADA to really bring this home at the local level and at that personal level that people always seek in their workplace relationships. The second group that I want to kind of acknowledge is, our global community impact partners. This is a team that you probably have seen through LinkedIn and others, done extraordinary work with supporting, healthcare leaders out there and first line responders. And, we've done a lot of initiatives in that area to giving back to the community. And we work very closely because all of those community partnerships that GCI helps us form and that we contribute to achieve that larger mission of really impacting all communities has been critically important. We learn from others who are doing wonderful things. We bring those ideas back into Johnson & Johnson. And then we also continue to ask them, hey, how can we partner further and support some very big initiatives here at Johnson & Johnson? And then a couple others would be our global talent and management team. Our leaders are incredibly important to everything that we do, and our global talent management team, ensures that we have leadership imperatives that are critically important. We're continuing to build mental and emotional health into that leadership training programs and making sure that our leaders, can truly support that psychologically healthy work environment. And then last, I would be remiss if I didn't speak to, like I did mention earlier, our Janssen colleagues who are focused on neuroscience, advancing the science and ensuring that we have novel therapies to treat very, very important conditions. So as you can imagine, we have incredible subject matter expertise within our Janssen organization, and we want to leverage that expertise in everything that we do and bring that to our employees and our strategy. From an effective communication perspective, I will just share that our communications teams and all of the folks on that team are probably the best in the world. And that's what I would say. I call them the glue to everything that we do. Having a global organization, it's essential to communicate effectively and clearly our goals, resources, and support that is available to all employees. During COVID, we launched a microsite. And we also, have J&J Responds, which is that microsite home. And what we started with from a messaging perspective in the beginning was this is your source of truth. J&J Responds is your source of truth. And what we did was we populated and gave all of those updated and made sure that all of our employees were well aware of what they needed to know to protect their health and safety. And then, what we were learning about everything that, involved COVID. So we actually identified, kind of a one source of truth to help people navigate that information overload that was happening to many of us in the beginning of the pandemic. And I think it was a key strategy. I also would tell you that between human resources, global health services, and our communications team, we're kind of the three-legged stool, and with everything we do, and then adding on those other partners that I just mentioned, it really does give us a very robust, if you will, bench to pull from and ensure that, what we do is effective and meeting the needs of our population. And we can effectively communicate all of that. And then the last piece would be access to resources. And I just can't underestimate the importance of that. If we go back, a few minutes ago when I was talking about, those comprehensive services and resources, those resources are are only important if our employees can access them, right? So what we've done is we've actually done even more work in terms of raising awareness on resources, making sure that we redesign specific, websites and portals to make sure it's easier for people to access resources. We've heightened the descriptions of resources, making sure we're pulling in stories of employees, how they're using these resources, so that, again, Sharon, if you and I were talking and I identified that, you might actually be stressed and anxious and you might benefit from, talking with an EAP counselor, our culture would support me introducing that to you. It wouldn't be a foreign concept to hear the word EAP, but it would also be something that I'd say, Sharon, I've actually used the EAP. I used it a few months ago when I was concerned about my daughter and her level of anxiety. It wasn't scary at all. All I had to do was pick up the phone and tell them my name. It was confidential. It was available 24/7. And it got me to the right list of counselors that I needed so that I could get my daughter to care. I would recommend that to you. And that's how the conversation goes. And that's super important for us because it enables people to not necessarily have, the fear of reaching out and getting the support they need, and ensuring that we can normalize this, reduce the stigma, and raise awareness on everything that's available. So I have only 2 more slides, and then I want to open it up so we have time for discussion, Sharon. So let me just share with you at a high level, our framework here at Johnson & Johnson for mental health and well-being, after I kind of shared with you how we've responded over the last, 14 months or so to the pandemic. Our focus is really on assessment, education, empowerment, and innovation. So when we think about those things, Johnson & Johnson has had a long history, and I'm grateful for the foundation that we had to work from over the last few years. But we really do focus on assessing the needs of our population. We do that even more frequently now. I know many organizations, including ours, are doing, sentiment pulse surveys to really understand the needs and assess the needs. We also use traditional approaches like a health risk assessment, and we even leverage our digital tools to do that assessment. So we really are focused on assessment of needs and making sure that we have the data in place to drive those important decisions. We're focused on education and empowerment. I talked a little bit about this, as I kind of explained our COVID response, but I do want to emphasize the fact that empowerment is critical. There's, although it probably seems to a smaller organization, wow, 200 plus employees around the globe, that's phenomenal. But if you look at the size of our organization, we've got, almost 140,000 employees. We can't be sitting and talking to everybody each and every day. So we really do have to build strategies that empower individuals to actually get that care and be aware of what they may need, recognizing those signs and symptoms, and then empowering them to get that themselves and reach out. And then the last is innovation. I think we've had the incredible innovation in the last year, and I look forward to advancing that along with Sean and my other colleagues as we move forward, improving the access, driving the quality. I was thinking when you were doing the introduction, Sharon, about the purpose of this group and to really shape change, advance change, drive and innovate. These are the types of groups that are helpful to us because we can partner with other employers to really drive that systems change, which brings me to those external partnerships that are so incredibly important, that exist for us. These challenges in the mental health as well as emotional health area, we're not only advancing the science, but we realize there's so much more to do. We've got a lot of barriers in terms of access to manage, and we have lots of opportunity to improve the quality of the care and actually understand the data behind all of that. So I think we have great opportunity. We are holistic in everything that we do. Physical and mental health are inherently integrated. We serve the whole person at Johnson & Johnson. I might be speaking today about mental health and well-being, but we truly do support the entire person and all their health and well-being. And then from an individual and an organizational perspective, we look at things individually as well as organizationally. And then finally, if we move over to the right, we have key partners and, quite frankly, customers, if you will, that we service. So we want to make sure that our executive leaders can provide that support and communicate the importance. Each and every day we help them in doing that, because they have, their day jobs, and we need to make sure that they have the ability to do that easily. And we've got the infrastructure in place for them to do it. Our people leaders are incredibly important to make sure that they can empower their own teams to effectively support their own well-being and their employees. We talk a lot about that, to say, take care of yourself first and role model, and then make sure that, your teams and you're giving that support needed so the teams can. And then last, our employees, making sure that they feel supported to effectively manage their mental health and well-being, and listening to them to make sure we can meet that need. So the last piece I just want to mention is on my last slide is, I think Jennifer Bruno, who's been a longtime leader and mentor to me here at Johnson & Johnson, she, made a great statement that we decided to share with all of you, that mental well-being is not a nice to have, but a must have. And we all need to take care of our mental health the same way we take care of our physical health. At Johnson & Johnson, we take this commitment very seriously, and each and every day, that is where I spend my time. And like I said, I'm honored to be a part of what we're doing at Johnson & Johnson and leading the strategy along with Sean. So I'll open it up for questions, and hopefully we'll be able to answer them and have a little bit of a discussion now, Sharon, if that's okay with you.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Jennifer and Sean. So let's get right into it. I'll go, and if we don't get to all of these, I promise we will get back to you by email after the presentation. So the first one is around data, and this is something Sean will know from the working group. Understanding the impact of your actions is so critical. So the question is, I'd love to know a little bit more about the data you're using to understand your employees' needs. What are you collecting? And how do you translate that into wellbeing interventions?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's something that I think, I've talked with, my colleagues, my other employers around the globe on. And I think US data is easier to manage and work with, right? We have a little bit more access to data on the US side than we do on the OUS side, which really causes us to have, if you will, a perspective that is, global in nature, but also localized. And I mention that because that's a really tangible example of how, depending on the population, if I were to segment my population, depending on the population I'm speaking about, I do have different data, which makes this process incredibly complex. Overall, like I mentioned in the comprehensive services and resources that we offer, we have short-term disability, long-term disability. We've got our medical and pharmacy data. We've got all of that traditional data that I think each one of us have looked at that have been in this field for many years. What I'm excited about from a data management perspective is the opportunity to leverage our digital resources and our virtual resources now. So I think that's where the growth opportunity is for us. Overall, what we try to do is we really try to look at our health data as well as our workforce data and glean insights so that we can understand the needs of our population. And I did mention the sentiment survey, which some call a pulse survey. We do that regularly with different employees around the globe and have been doing this. I think it was, probably April that we started. We might have even started, in March last year. And what that did for us is it took our, I'm going to say, the traditional health risk assessment and that kind of annual assessment approach and took it to almost more of a real-time approach. So I think the biggest shifts we've seen and what we're doing is we're trying to get data more frequently and then dig back and peel back the onion to learn even more in the areas of mental and emotional health. And I'll give you an example in the area of resilience. We use a digital app right now and a digital tool that helps build competencies in the area of resilience. And so Sharon, if you were a user of that resource, you would be building in kind of all these different areas, which is actually drawn from 18 different factors. And those factors then are evidence-based factors that kind of influence your resilience level. So when I think about the data question, I think about, if we understand in an aggregate level, where we fit in all these different 18 areas, it gives me the understanding to say, we're really low in this area that can really impact somebody's ability to be resilient. Let's improve our programming there. So, back to the question, I think we're looking at all sorts of traditional health data, as well as kind of the innovative data that's coming in through the means of digital and virtual these days. And then we're taking that to the next level to say, how can we actually look at this in a more granular level, and then connect and identify the correlation and the relationships between the health data and the workforce data. And so that's where we're going with things. I will tell you that we're on a journey in this area. And I think I haven't found an employer colleague yet that's told me that they've figured it all out and they have all the data they need. So, on a sideline conversation, we could probably talk about all the data that you and I want on mental health and well-being. The other area that I would just say is, there's a huge difference in terms of physical and mental health when you talk about, quality measurement. And we don't have the measures in place currently in the system consistently to be able to measure this in the same way we do physical health. So I'll go back to Jen Bruno's statement. We need to bring mental health data in particular up to the level that we have physical health data. And then we're going to be talking. So, and some of that we can't control at Johnson & Johnson, but you can sure as heck believe that we're helping to drive change and wanting to really improve and have wonderful partners that we're doing that with.
Thank you. And I think it's definitely part of the ambition of what the global employee group is trying to work on. And you did answer in part one of the next questions, but I wonder, you mentioned COVID put everything on steroids. I wonder, the question was around digital and innovation and the speed, I would imagine, innovation went across Johnson & Johnson. Was there anything else, Sean, yourself wanted to add around the digital innovation or tools that you developed or accelerated during this pandemic?
Sure. Great question. As Jennifer mentioned earlier, we have a key focus on using design thinking to really help us understand how to build that. I use the term hybrid model, really focusing on both on-site engagement as well as virtual well-being capability. I think the one question we have to ask is, we're asking our employees to share a lot of data with us, right? Sentiment analysis, health risk assessment, resilience surveys. So what are the techniques we can use to really motivate, inspire, encourage our employees to share those data? So as part of our design thinking exercise, we're really looking to the science of behavioral economics. It's really that study of intricacy on how we make decisions based on our emotional, cultural, economic factors. So in a lot of cases, we will be deploying what we call extrinsic motivation factors, wellness points, subsidies, using gamification techniques so you can compete with other colleagues to earn points, as well as intrinsic motivation techniques. That's really focused on education. So eventually, when the extrinsic motivation rewards goes away, you will continue to do this because it's good for you, good for your family's total health. So we're looking at embedding these different techniques into our digital health tools. For our brick and mortar on-site facilities, it's a little bit easier. So we can influence through signage, through how we position the food in the cafeteria. The sodas is always on the bottom shelf, so it's not as easier to access. Jim mentioned we want to make healthy choice, the easy choice, and the value choice. So when you want to implement that in a digital ecosystem architecture, it takes a little bit more design thinking and, of course, good UI and UX designs. So I think this is where we're putting a lot of efforts. It's not just about the digitalization of the traditional tools, but it's also embedding some of these design principles and design thinking techniques so we can make these new digital touch points frictionless. And by in the end, our employees actually feel motivated and inspired of wanting to use these tools, sharing their insights, and ultimately they become really, we call sticky. They keep coming back, so there's that engagement. And over time, we'll see the exposure. We'll use the tool to collect the data. This is where we can then run the longitudinal studies and cohort analysis to actually answer the various salient questions. Does these tools make an impact and difference on our culture of health?
And then if I can jump on that one, another question around your online resources, and do you see difference in uptake with employees who do not have access to a work computer or a cell phone, and how are you encouraging those employees to access the online resources that you've made available?
Yeah, I mean, Sean, I think to respond to that question, we've seen significant growth in our digital tools, significant growth. In fact, we're still tracking it weekly because we're getting so many new users. And again, I would go back to that learning curve, right? So many of us that maybe weren't using digital tools as actively in our lives, by nature of what we're all going through, we've been forced to. So, now that we're forced to, and it's become almost easier because I didn't have that learning curve anymore, the adoption rate has been tremendous. And not only the adoption rate, I'll just tack on to what Sean said, the engagement rate. It's not that they just log on once and they're not there. They're using it time and again because of the design, thinking that Sean was referencing. We're really building everything so that everything integrates. Being part of an ecosystem and understanding how that ecosystem can support the individual based on their own needs, critically important to the work that we're doing.
Great, thank you. The next question is, have you done any specific actions on dealing with employee fatigue as we continue to work from home? We've all heard this Zoom fatigue, Teams fatigue, whatever it might be, but the fatigue and working from home, any specific best practices to share there?
Yeah, I'm gonna raise two things. First, the answer is a solid yes. It's probably something I speak about, each and every time that I'm within my colleagues at either a forum, a town hall, or even a one-on-one. In fact, yesterday I was having a conversation with somebody who's experiencing some change within their organization, and I asked the question, how are you doing? Are you getting the recovery you need? Because we know from the research that, the greater level of uncertainty, the higher level of stress within your world, the more rest and recovery that you need. And if you don't, and we have a really nice visual that we kind of use an arrow, and the left side of the arrow is kind of blue and green, and then you move further to the right, and we show all of those signs that might indicate fatigue, exhaustion, and then it goes to the red. And if it's cumulative, if you don't stop, pause, and focus on your recovery, you are going to be exhausted. You're going to have a harder time focusing on the priorities that you want to achieve. You're going to have a harder time focusing on the very important quality work that you have to produce. So it impacts your work. It also impacts your life. So for me, I mentioned I'm a mother. So when I leave my, day in the office, which is right down the hall from the 3 kids down the hall, how does it show up for me? It shows up for me because I'm maybe a little bit snappy with a question that they ask me, or maybe I have a little bit less patience than I normally would. So I'm sharing those stories with you to say, this is how we're talking about it. We're talking about it in real time. The other point I just want to make is we have a longstanding commitment to the energy management principles that really drive us as an organization and as individuals. So for many years, we've had something called an Energy for Performance program. And this Energy for Performance program is very much focused on ensuring that individuals really do a lot of self-awareness, and they understand the physical, emotional, spiritual focus that they need to really invest to manage their energy appropriately. So when you say fatigue, I feel like we look at that as energy management here at Johnson & Johnson. So we're very excited. I know, Sean, I'm gonna say it. I know you probably want to say it with me, but in 2020, we reached the goal of training over 100,000 employees in Energy for Performance. It was a huge goal for us. We're so proud of achieving that. And I think as we move forward and continue to manage exhaustion, fatigue, all of those things that impact our energy, we're further integrating our Energy for Performance program into all of the work that we do here at Johnson & Johnson.
Yeah. Jen, I have taken the classes 3 times. It's amazing. In some of the techniques we acquire really help us oscillate from stress back to that strategic recovery that Jen mentioned. In our longitudinal study, where we assess those who have taken the classes repeatedly, that repeat exposure becomes what we call a protective factor against the stress and strain we're seeing during COVID and beyond. So we really value the energy management principles. And because of the pandemic, we're now offering all the training via Zoom. But the data we are collecting now is telling us it's making a significant impact in the health and well-being of our employees. So in many ways, it's that intervention technique, but it's also one of the key protective factors for us to sustain our culture of health.
Great, thank you. And we're running out of time. There's a couple of questions I'll get back to you by email, but just one that I'd love to know, is there anything you would have done differently with everything that happened? And you had all the foundational values there, but is there anything that you would have done differently in the management of mental health and well-being with your co-workers?
So it's a good question, Sharon. I'm going to answer it a bit provocatively and say, I don't know different. I think the answer is more. And I can't get enough of a needs assessment, right? I need to know more. I need to know more. I need to know more about what's going to help you, because that's going to help me help you. I think flexible work arrangements. I saw a question in the chat. We enhanced our flexible work arrangements. Flexible work is the new norm. Doing more of that, understanding more about what we need, and then like our new ways of working, how is that going to be the optimal situation for every individual that shows up to work at J&J? And then third, I think the more of us recognizing that small habits are really important, whether you're an organization that's just starting on this mission, or you're an organization like J&J that's been committed to this for decades. Just those small investments make the biggest impact. And, don't underestimate the impact you can have on others by investing in their mental and emotional well-being. You touch lives when you do that well. And I'm grateful for the opportunity that Sean and I have to do that each and every day. So thank you.
Super. Thank you so much. We've come up to the time. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening in. We'll share the recording, and I'll get back to the 2 or 3 questions that we didn't reach out. So a huge thank you, Jennifer and Sean, for sharing this. The recording will be on our website, and we'll be with all of you next month with Ahold Delhaize. So thank you very much, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Sharon. Take care.